What matters is what you do. Now, he had said he's going to end the war in Iraq. And he took a very brave stance on the war in 2002. What I am puzzled by is why he is pushing for the expansion of war in Afghanistan. Why he's not learning from his own example, his own prescience, his own conscience, as he spoke out years ago. I think it's the reason he's president today is because he was against the Iraq War. There's very little difference between him and Hillary Rodham Clinton on policy positions, except for Iraq. She was voting for the war in 2002, as were the leading Democrats, Kerry and Edwards. They were running for president, but they have since said that they were wrong. It took her to the very end to admit that maybe she was wrong. Barack Obama, though wasn't voting at the time, wasn't a senator, he said it was wrong, and I do think that's why he's in the White House today.
How much do you think that might be just a general fear among Democrats that if they're pushing both a progressive domestic policy, if they show up perceived as weak on foreign policy, that they'll, going to take a drubbing in 2010? Do you think it's just political considerations that way? Or?
I think these lines are breaking down now in the face of these cataclysms. I don't think we can say we know the progressive stand or the conservative stand or the right-wing stand on issues anymore. I mean, I think almost everyone agrees that the Iraq War is a catastrophe. I think it's why Barack Obama won. I mean, he united people. Well, I was going to say he united people across the political spectrum. I think George Bush united people across the political spectrum. But I mean, I was just flying now in the plane next to a real estate developer who sounded extremely conservative. The war was a catastrophe and wondered about Afghanistan. I was flying next to a military consultant 2 weeks ago from Grand Rapids. He was headed to Huntsville, the military town. He's a consultant. He came out of the military, was in aerospace for decades. Coming out of Michigan, the most depressed state, auto industry in shambles. And this goes to two different issues. And I said to him, but you must be doing great, right? President Obama promises to expand the war in Afghanistan. He said, yeah, no, that's good for business. He said, but it baffles me. I said, why? It's good for you. He said, no, I'm an American. It's not good for this country. I don't understand it, he said. And I said, do other people? He said, look. He said, you look at the terrain of Afghanistan, for one thing, he's thinking very technically and even compare it to Iraq. He said, but this war, look at history, this war is unwinnable. I said, to other consultants, contractors, people in the Pentagon, people you meet with feel this way. He said, a lot of us. We're very surprised at what he's doing. So I wouldn't say there's a group of conservatives who want to expand the war in Afghanistan. I think it's all very divided right now because Iraq was such a catastrophe and it was built on a lie, and people recognize that across the political spectrum that we were lied to. Now, on Afghanistan, President Obama said, let's draw down in Iraq. We don't know what he's going to do, if there are going to be permanent U.S. bases in Iraq, what's going to happen with the military contractors. I questioned him at Cooper Union in New York when he was running for president, and asked him what he's going to do about military contractors. He said, no, he wasn't for a ban on military contractors. There's many military contractors in Iraq as soldiers. They haven't commented on that. But Afghanistan, it really matters what he's saying. And now it's just called for, we're up to $1 trillion just have money spent on the wars, and that's partly what Barack Obama has just called for now, Joe Stiglitz. He has said we're talking a $3 trillion war just in Iraq, because if you look at taking care of the veterans when they come home, we're talking trillions of dollars. Can we afford this? And you compare it to what we're missing here at home, not only the care for veterans, and they certainly must be cared for, but in this trip with the military consultant that I had done in Michigan, you have, again, unusual allies. You have an auto industry that's in a shambles. You have Chrysler and GM having to pay more for health care than they have to pay for steel. They're talking about building factories in Canada because they have single payer and they don't have to bear the burden of health care. They cannot compete with the foreign automakers because the foreign automakers from Western industrialized countries pay governments pay for health care. They don't have to bear those costs. The U.S. companies can't compete with them. It is a rare moment. The book I'm reading now about Frances Perkins, remarkable woman, first woman secretary, Secretary of Labor under FDR. When she was asked to be Secretary of Labor, there were the ones, her, Henry Wallace, Harry Hopkins, the New York social worker, they pushed through the New Deal. But it's not even the inner circle that pushed it through around Roosevelt. It was the people, millions of people in the streets that ultimately did it. And that's the lesson for all of us. That's what creates change. But Frances Perkins, when he asked her to be Secretary of Labor, and she knew all that she would be up against, and also being the first woman, she knew that would be the hugest thing she'd be up against. She said, I have to know that you're open to the 40-hour work week, that you're open to unemployment benefits, she's saying this to FDR. You're open to Social Security and national health care. He said yes to it all, so she took the job. She got most of what she wanted, but she had to compromise on one thing. They said, if you're going to get the other things, you have to give up on national health care. The AMA, American Medical Association, launched this vast campaign against it. She didn't get it for the next decades of her life. She would speak out for national health care. And we're at a new position now, 75 years later, where I really do think people across the political spectrum, entities like vast multinational corporations like the U.S. auto industry could join together with conventional healthcare activists who just deeply believe we have a problem with more than 40 million people don't have healthcare at all, and more than 100 million people are not adequately insured, that we have to change the way we provide healthcare in this country. So I would never quite say, well, in order to push a progressive agenda here, that maybe you have to make war here. I also think it's very important who his inner circle is, and I am surprised by the number of old guard he has brought in. Because while President Obama says, I am the decider, so don't focus so much on who I bring in.
Right.
This is too big. Your inner circle, go back to FDR, they're the ones that fomented the New Deal, it's amazing, really matters. And if you want to wage peace, it's not just a matter of lack of war. It's people who surround you, who are experienced, who have the years of diplomacy, of waging peace, that make it happen. You cannot do it alone. And that's what's of grave concern right now, from the economy to war.
I certainly agree with that. So, Amy, I want to switch gears for a minute because I think we're going to run out of time soon. And I want to talk about
40 flight.
Oh, don't worry, we got
right. I know you have it all done.
Keeping an eye
just to let you guys know, and I want to just talk to you out there alone too.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to really make sure that we talked about was kind of the future of media. We've been watching across the country how traditional media, newspapers are closing down. The consolidation has taken place, and then of course the explosion of the internet. And of course, on one hand, you have to really figure out how to believe what you read on the internet and how to do your research. And then on the other hand, with the major markets closing down, where do you see the future of media going, and how can people be assured that they're going to a source that's actually trusted and that they can rely on, other than, of course, Democracy Now!, cable, Portland Community Media, and those kind of sources?
Well, this is a key question. In addition to doing Democracy Now!, I've become a columnist for King Features, and so I've really learned a lot about the newspaper industry in this country. The Portland Oregonian runs the column, right, Breaking the Sound Barrier, I think. Is that true? A weekly column. And I want to thank them for that. And so I've learned a lot about the mainstream media in this, but it's been very frightening to see, like we were in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer shut down. Rocky Mountain News, gone. It almost was celebrating 150 years, survived the Depression, survived the floods, could not survive this economic downturn. The Philadelphia papers, the Philadelphia Daily News, the Philadelphia Inquirer, bankrupt. Minneapolis Star-Tribune, bankrupt. San Francisco Chronicle, in big trouble. New York Times, in the next few weeks, threatens to close down the Boston Globe if they don't give back big concessions. The New York Times itself, Washington Post, big trouble. And what I am very concerned about is the lack of